The rack. The rack in medieval Europe, specifically at the Tower of London, the rack was the primary tool for extracting confessions and breaking a person's spirit. Though it looked like a simple rectangular wooden frame, its operation was beyond human endurance. The design featured rotating rollers at both ends of the frame. The victim was laid on the wooden bed, with their hands and feet bound by heavy chains or ropes. As the interrogation began, the executioner would slowly turn the rollers in opposite directions. The initial stage of stretching produced agonizing muscular pain. As the tension increased, the joints would begin to dislocate. First, the shoulders would pop out of their sockets, followed by the elbows and knees. In that silent dungeon, the sound of bones cracking and joints snapping echoed clearly. If the victim refused to confess, the tension was increased to the point where nerves and muscles completely tore apart. The result was rarely just death. Those who survived were left crippled for life, as their body's physical structure was permanently altered. In many cases, the stretching was so intense that internal organs would rupture, nearly tearing the body into two separate pieces. The Iron Maiden. In the museums of the 18th and 19th centuries, this was displayed as a terrifying symbol of justice and fear. The Iron Maiden was a massive, human-shaped iron cabinet, or sarcophagus. As ordinary as it looked on the outside, the truth inside was lethal. When the victim was forced to stand inside, the heavy doors were slowly closed. On the interior of these doors were long, sharp iron spikes. The cruelty of this device was hidden in its design. The spikes were positioned so that instead of piercing vital organs like the heart or brain, they would sink deep into the victim's eyes, shoulders, chest, and limbs. Again, the goal was not instant death. As the doors closed, the victim was completely immobilized within the iron shell, where any slight movement would fill them with even more pain. They were left to suffer in that darkness and iron grip for hours, and sometimes days. Ultimately, massive hemorrhaging or infection caused their death. This device was a testament to how far the human mind could go to inflict pain. The breaking wheel. In medieval Europe, the most brutal and public form of execution was the breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel. At the start of the punishment, the victim was stretched out and tied to the ground, or directly to a large wooden wheel. The executioner would then begin systematically striking the victim's limbs with a heavy iron club or hammer. The strikes were timed to break the bones without killing the victim instantly. The joints and bones of the body were shattered until they became completely flexible. The second stage of this torture was even more horrific. The victim's broken limbs, now little more than mangled flesh, were woven through the spokes of the wheel like fabric. The wheel was then hoisted horizontally atop a tall pole. The victim was left in that state under the open sky. The unbearable pain of shattered bones, the scorching sun, thirst, and attacks from scavenging birds circling above created a living scene of hell. Death did not come quickly. The victim would remain alive in this agony for several days, until their body completely shut down. This punishment was a gruesome warning to society of the horrific end that awaited those who committed crimes against the state. Impalement. In the 15th century, Vlad the Impaler, the ruler of Wallachia, adopted a method of punishment that struck terror into the entire world. It was known as impalement. This was not merely a way to kill, it was a psychological weapon designed to paralyze viewers with fear. This punishment utilized a long, sturdy, and sharpened wooden stake. The victim was sat upon the stake, which would slowly pierce through their body. The stake was then planted vertically into the ground. The defining characteristic of Vlad's cruelty was his precision. He instructed executioners to insert the stake in a way that avoided vital organs, such as the heart or lungs. The horrific objective was to ensure the victim did not die instantly. Due to gravity, the victim's own weight would slowly push them downward, forcing the stake deeper into the body. This process was so slow and painful that the condemned would often suffer for 3 to 4 days in the scorching sun and thirst. Eventually, they would die from organ failure or severe infection. Vlad used this method to create entire forests of the impaled to ensure enemy armies would retreat the moment they saw him. The Brazen Bull. During the 6th century BC in Sicily, ancient Greece, a new instrument of cruelty was developed, known as the Brazen Bull. It was crafted by a sculptor named Perillus for the tyrannical king Phalaris. While the device appeared to be a massive, hollow bull made of bronze, its reality was far more sinister. At the time of execution, the victim was locked inside the belly of the bull through a hidden hatch. A massive fire was then lit beneath the statue. As the bronze structure heated up, the interior temperature would skyrocket like a furnace, slowly roasting the person inside alive. The most bizarre and terrifying feature of this device was its acoustic system. A complex network of tubes and pipes was built near the bull's mouth. When the victim screamed in unbearable agony, the sound would be distorted as it passed through these pipes. To those standing outside, it didn't sound like a human scream. It sounded like the roar of a furious bull. The ultimate historical irony is that the device's first test was conducted on its creator, Perillus. King Phalaris shoved Perillus into his own invention just to see how authentic the bull's roar truly sounded. Lingchi in Chinese history. From the 10th century until 19,005, Lingchi was considered the most brutal and humiliating form of execution. Reserved for heinous crimes like treason or parricide, its goal was not just to end a life, but to completely destroy the individual in front of society. During the process, the condemned was bound tightly to a post in a public square. The executioner used an incredibly sharp knife to begin slicing small pieces of flesh from the body, one by one. The horror lay in the executioner's training. They were taught to avoid vital organs so the victim would not die immediately. According to historians, in some cases, over 3,000 cuts were inflicted. To prolong the unbearable agony, the victim was often given small doses of opium, not for relief, but to keep them conscious so they would remain awake to feel the pain of every single cut. This punishment was treated as a public spectacle. Its psychological aim was to instill deep fear in society, sending a message that anyone who violated the law would have both their body and soul torn to pieces. Death finally came only when the body succumbed to extreme blood loss or the eventual severing of a vital organ. Rat torture. The process of this punishment was as simple as it was grotesque. The victim was bound tightly to a hard table. A heavy metal cage was placed upside down on their naked stomach, containing several hungry and aggressive rats. The true horror began when glowing red-hot coals were placed on top of the metal cage. As the heat from the fire caused the metal cage to burn, the rats inside would become frantic. Desperate to escape the heat, they would frantically search for a way out. Surrounded by fire and hot metal on all sides, only one escape route remained: downward, through the victim's soft flesh. In a desperate attempt to survive, the hungry rats would begin eating through the victim's stomach, alive. They would slowly tear through skin and intestines, burrowing into the victim's body. This unbearable physical pain, combined with the psychological horror of an animal crawling inside one's own body, gave the victim a glimpse of hell before they finally died. This punishment was proof of the extent to which humans could misuse even the smallest creatures of nature to inflict pain. Scaphism. In the ancient Persian Empire, cruelty was elevated to a terrifying new level. Among their most horrific methods was scaphism. More than mere physical torture, it was a prolonged process of biological decay. The execution was meticulously systematic. The victim was fastened between two narrow boats, trapping the torso inside while the head, hands, and feet remained exposed. This left the condemned completely helpless. Then they were force-fed a mixture of milk and honey, not for nourishment, but for the sole purpose of inducing severe diarrhea. The next stage was even more revolting. The victim's face and limbs were smeared with honey to attract swarms of insects. The boats were then abandoned in a stagnant pond or a rotting swamp. The victim remained trapped within their own waste, which quickly bred parasites and vermin. These insects would not just crawl over the body, they would burrow into the flesh to lay eggs, eating the victim alive. This was no quick death. The condemned remained alive for weeks as their flesh rotted away, until their final breath was taken by total organ failure or septic shock.